Now, being a noob is not really that bad. I mean, you're doing something new and figuring out, how to do something correctly and better and build up your skills. But me, I was a noob for a very long time in Kerbal Space Program because nobody would really, teach me how to do something. They would explain it very badly, and I would have to learn by myself. And I've learned by myself, and I just wanted to show people how I did that. Now, this could probably be the simplest way to rendezvous and dock in Kerbal Space Program, which, I know can be very hard, but this is the noob simple version. So, we're at the Space Center. We're gonna go to the space plane, not the space, but the vehicle assembly building, and then we'll build our rocket to rendezvous and dock. So, the first thing we're gonna build is the Docker 1, and that'll go up and be in an orbit, and then something eventually will rendezvous with it. But I'm gonna fast forward a little bit here. You should probably, this should not be super fast for you, but if you just want to pause the video one by one, see how this happened if you're really new to Kerbal Space Program. But just build a simple rocket. That's what I'm doing. Build it not too complex. You don't want a Saturn V going just to orbit. So I just did 3 stages. 3 stages being the booster, rocket, and then the second stage rocket. I think I named that wrong in order. I don't know, but you get the idea. So we're almost done here. And make sure if you're going to use this moving tool that you don't move those boosters sideways, because if you move those things sideways, okay, yeah, my phone's not turned off. I thought it was. Anyway, so if you move those boosters sideways, then those can detach from the actual rocket. So when you go and launch, they'll I think they'll fly fine originally, or just right off the bat, but a few seconds into the flight they're gonna get loosened and blow up. So let's go ahead and launch, and that takes forever to load, but we should be able to fly in T-minus something seconds. We're just gonna go into a view here, make sure Jebediah Kerman is all safe and sound in his super small capsule. That, I think it's supposed to be a Gemini capsule. So if we go into our map, once we launch, I think, this should be fast forwarded, because I kind of got bad frame rate because those particles really want to slow down the PC. But if we go into our map once we launch, you should be able to see a trajectory, and you want that trajectory to be in a pretty stable orbit from east to west. East to west being the easiest route to take to go into orbit, because that just takes advantage of the Earth's rotation. And if you're going, let's see here, if you're going west to east, you're fighting against it. But this orbit got a little bit pointed towards the north. To the north, you see up 12 o'clock from that little flag. That's a space center. So that orbit got a little bit north, but you should not do that. Try to not do that. You could if you wanted to, but it just kind of makes things unnecessarily complex. I did it on accident because, I'm not quite sure. I think I just forgot the fins, so the rocket wasn't really willing to flip over easily. You don't want the rocket to flip over too easily, because then it'll lose its control and the weight will collapse on it. And I'm firing up the second engine now, and that will be the one to get us into a orbital trajectory, or an orbit. So go ahead and set up your nodes right here. If you don't know how to use nodes in Kerbal Space Program, you should probably use a different video, but it's pretty simple. You left click on the area, the apoapsis, not the apoapsis. People like to say that, or apolapse. I don't know why. But you want to click on that and probably add a maneuver. You don't want to do it anywhere else because that would make the orbit kind of just asymmetric, very asymmetric. But here we go. We're about to do an orbital burn. There we go. It'll take a few seconds. You left click on that little icon next to the nav ball, and it looks like, I don't know, just a triangle that's missing a lot of hearts, and it's got some things. But if you hover over it, it'll say maneuver. So click on that, and the autopilot will bring it to the maneuver node. And this is very asymmetric, so what I'm going to do is head to the gosh, I can never pronounce it. I never really pronounce it in real life usually, but I'm going to go here and burn retrograde, and that's the opposite way of where our velocity is. So that's going to slow down the other side of the orbit where we are orbiting roughly at 132,000 meters. Yeah, meters. So now we can head back to the Space Center where we'll build our Kerbal X, and I use the Kerbal X. Basically just build a simple rocket that has a docking port and that can make it up into orbit. So you can see me scrolling down here. And I find the Kerbal X, and I do a little bit of modifications to it because I'm not landing on the moon, but you can't really land on the moon with Kerbal X because it always runs out of fuel. So I'm going to get rid of unnecessary weight. I'm going to leave the solar panels and those batteries on because those do supply me some power, and I need some power. But we're rendezvousing to a stranded ship, like a simulated stranded ship, because you saw me decouple that. That wasn't like, you know, on accident. I'm actually setting up a simulated stranded, you know, vessel in orbit, because sometimes that does happen in science mode and stuff, and that'll be kind of bad for your credit and stuff if you know, killed a Kerbal, which is kind of violent. So I'm wondering if, you know, why it's not E10. Kerbal Space Program, I think, is $15 on Steam now. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. Because, like, there was the Making History expansion that came out, and that automatically reduced the price of Kerbal Space Program, just to, you know, balance it out. So if you bought both of them, I think it would, you know, equal up to, let's see, I think the other one was 20, so about $35, if not 30. So I don't know, that might be done now. I haven't checked. I don't even have the Making History expansion. But always remember your parachutes on your vessels, because if you're going down and you realize that, you know, you don't have parachutes, of course 1.4.1 that introduces parachutes on your little Kerbals, so you can deploy that if you forget parachutes. I wonder if those should work on other planets. That would be so awesome, you know, going skydiving on Duna or Lathe. That would be pretty awesome. But rendezvousing is basically, I think, one of the most, you know, the hardest things you can do in Kerbal Space Program. But once you learn it like the way I did, it is pretty simple. So you want to make sure, sorry, there's a little bit delayed there, but you want to make sure that that vessel is just before, above you, just before it's going to cross your path. And I'm going to speed up this, but you get the process. Well, immediately once you launch, you want to pitch over due east or west, whatever way you put your thing into orbit. So immediately do that, and then like make it like a curve. So you don't want to just fly straight up. I mean, if you're new to Kerbal Space Program, you think, oh, if you just put, you know, something in orbit and then wait for the space station to come above you and then fly straight up to it, that is absolutely wrong, and that will not work for a number of reasons, and that's just not how physics works. But you see the aircraft pointing due north. That is because my Rendezvous Docker 1, that is in a northern orbit a little bit more above the Kerbal Space Center, so I'm going to have to intersect that orbit. You can see here, I stop here, I kind of go out more, make sure that is about 1,000 meters less than your target. So this is 134, I believe, and I wanted 133, or I think it was 135, something like that. I can't see, but anyway, you want about 1,000 meters below your target, just so you can catch up, because a lower orbit means that you will be faster, you will, fly faster. And now I'm just maneuvering my nodes again, and I want to line it up with the Docker 1's orbit by lifting up the, I don't know if that's a radial in or something, but that tilts it, and it can correct your slanted orbit. So I did that, and then I lined up my orbits here, and then I'm waiting for my new maneuver node. Remember, you want to left click on that maneuver node. It's right next to that squiggle line on the right, left of the gyroscope. I don't know how it could be more specific than that, but I think Valentina Kerman's gonna have a pretty long flight, because the way I rendezvous, of course you can do it in a whole bunch of different ways. There's a whole bunch of ways you can do this, but the easiest way, the absolute easiest way for me, is to just get into an orbit a little bit lower than your targets. Because remember, if your target's at 100,000, kilometers or meters, I don't know. Kerbal Space Program's at altitude, I think, is messed up a little bit, because it says kilometers and meters, and on MechJeb it says kilometers, but it really means meters because your altitude says meters, and it equivalates that, but it's kind of messed up. But say, like, on the top, it was 100,000 of those. You wanted 99,000 meters below your intended target. So you want to burn until that maneuver, that yellow, is completely used up. That was very confusing for me, my first time in Kerbal Space Program, but I'm kind of moving fast. But just feel free to pause this video or slow it down to 0.25 so I sound like I'm speaking extremely slow. But yeah, that you want to burn to that maneuver node until all of that yellow is used up and there's no more yellow, and it'll say 0.0 meters per second. Once it's near, you want it to be as near as possible, 0.0 meters per second, then you're on the right path. But if you just burn a little bit, then you're nowhere close to where you should be, because it doesn't count as altitude, it counts as meters per second. The maneuvering does. So those meters per second determine your altitude, if that makes sense. Because the faster you go, the further out your orbit's going to be, because you're actually, countering the gravity of Kerbal. So you're going to fly out a little bit more, and if you increase those meters per second to the point where, you're gone, you'll escape the the gravitational pull and maybe go to the moon. But you see how I'm time warping, and you need to left click the Docker 1, set it as target, and you see these two purple and orange maneuver things. Those represent where your two spaceships will be at a certain point, at the next point. And the purple one represents the next maneuver, and the orange ones mean the one that's upcoming. So the orange one is always closest. But what I'm going to do is go to the tracking station, and this is kind of what I do because it takes a long time. But what's good about taking a long time, it looks elliptical for a second, but it's not, it's just loading in. But it takes a long time, and I need to get rid of, Kerbal Space Program has a glitch where, like, yeah, you see those trajectories of those planets. I have to, like, zoom in, then zoom out, then zoom in, then zoom out until they're gone. But if you take a long time, that means your thing are going to be, precise, and you're not going to, like, overshoot it, or, and you can see these are gradually getting closer to each other, very gradually. And I think it takes about, 3 days or something like that. It could take up to, if not longer. It depends on how far away or how much of a difference your orbit is. Because again, if it's like the exact same orbit as your target, you're not going to get anywhere, and you're going to stay at the same distance away for a very, very long time. But if you are 1,000 meters, the thing is, if you're closer to the Earth, it takes less effort to have more speed. But if you're farther away, you're slower, but you're more stable, if that kind of makes sense. So the closer you are to Kerbin, the faster your orbit's going to be. And this is the Ketchup way. I think I should just call it that, the Ketchup way, where you just catch up eventually to the pod, eventually, because you're at a slightly lower orbit. But this is the most simplest way. If this sounds complex, just try it out for yourself and experiment. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you just go into, like, make sure your orbits are lined up, but your altitude is slightly lower than your targets. So if you do that, then yes, you will eventually line up. And that's probably the easiest part, is launching and orbiting and just waiting. You just gotta wait. You just gotta have patience, because you want to have those two maneuver nodes get as close as possible. The next time, and you see they're gradually closing distance. And this is going to be a longer video, but if you don't like that, and if you don't like my, simple explaining, if this is too easy for you, go ahead and watch, like, Scott Manley or something, because he can do some pretty cool stuff with the Kerbal Space Program. He's a pretty cool guy. So yeah, I watched him, and I thought it made no sense to me, so I eventually just learned on my own. So hopefully I can kind of teach how to do that a little bit, and I think this is just, like, the easiest way to do it. Oh, there's Jeb. Look it up. There's actually an update for 1.4.1. So Jeb autopilots you. Basically, you just put in a destination altitude, it'll launch you up, it'll do, like, a gravity turn, so you don't have to, like, turn your aircraft for you, like, by yourself manually. You just basically you just sit back, have some popcorn, and relax. And then it also has a Rendezvous autopilot. You just click that and click the final distance, set whatever you want to rendezvous with as a target, and then, oh, there's Kerbal Space Center. There it is, passing by in that little flag. So, Jeb, yeah, you could just rendezvous it, and it'll do everything for you. It has a home and transfer, and here we go. Our closest intercept point is approaching. So that means that, we're going to be as close as we can to the target without starting to pass each other again. And if you're wondering, oh, why can't we wait longer to make sure it's more perfect? And the distance is 0.0. That's a little bit closer. Well, no. that's not going to work because your orbit, it works in a way to where your closest intercept point is your closest intercept point. After that, you're going to get farther and farther away, like the opposite. It's like positives and negatives. You can see that closest intercept point back there, but I want to be in the light. There should be 2 of them. If not one is fine. I mean, you don't have to always have yellow or orange and purple at the same time. But here we go. We're going to slow down, stop time warping. And you can time warp using the arrow keys next to the M key and the question mark key. I always clicked it for a long time when I could just realize there's a hotkey on your keyboard. If you're playing this on the PlayStation 4, I'm sure there's, or Xbox, I'm not quite sure which consoles there's released to, but we're going to burn retrograde. Click on that little retrograde thing and burn off until you see that meters per second goes to 0. So it'll say target and then 0 point something. You want to get, that's the distance, that's like the difference between you and the target. Once you're done that, you want to go towards the target. You can see the green button labeled and accelerate towards that, and you can see that maneuver node is coming towards you. That's because you're burning towards the target and you're going towards it, and that's 0.0, so that means you're going to collide. You don't want to collide. As you can see, it comes very close here. You can see it less than a kilometer, so it's going to come very close here. But once that's at 0.0, you want to be very careful because you want to burn. You can see that dot coming in close, close, close. I'm going to burn right here, and that's about perfect timing. And this has got a low thrust to weight ratio. That means that this little rocket doesn't require as much, acceleration to, fly somewhere super fast. It's really nice. So what you want to do is go to docking mode. Well, I want to go to docking mode. Or you can do I, K, J, and L keys. But you want to point towards that target, and then make sure your prograde is centered inside the target. Oh my gosh, this is kind of sounding confusing. But this is kind of going fast, but if you just look, I'm going to switch between vessels just to make sure they're pointing at each other so I don't have to maneuver around it. You can switch vessels by going to the map and like right clicking and say, switch to or something, but I'm using Easy Vessel Switch. That's a mod that allows you to hold down Alt and then just click on whatever thing to switch to it, which is very nice. But you can also do it, stock version as well. So now you want that prograde, the yellow into the pink. So that prograde that means that you're going towards that target. And you can see I'm a little bit high here, and so I'm going to counter that by going down a little bit. And you just gotta kind of learn your keys if you go into docking mode. I mean, like Control is backward, Shift is forward, W, A, S, and D tell you where to go. So now we're closing distance. You want to burn off, burn so you're not going too far. I'm actually going to switch to make sure they're lined up, because right now it looks like they're above, but it's actually pretty lined up. So slowly take her in. Do not force it at like 3 meters per second. That'll cause damage and the stuff will explode, and Jebediah Kerman's gonna smash red buttons. And then boom, there we go. That's easy. You're docked and you can see Jebediah Kerman up here, up there. So, that lets you know. So I'm gonna transfer Jebediah Kerman, because this is a rescue mission, into this module. And I'm going to say bye-bye to this little module, because it served its purpose, and it's going to probably burn up into the atmosphere. Probably not. I'm just probably going to terminate it in the tracking station, which you can do, but at a risk of killing crew members inside, because if you terminate something and there's crew members inside, that's not good. So I'm going to burn retrograde to bring us back down to Earth. So it looks like we're going to land in the desert, and we're going to have to, survive off of sand. But you can see that, and you can see my mouse cursor waving around. That looks very nice, doesn't it? Yeah, but you can see the module disappearing. I was going to originally land at the Kerbal Space Center, but I was like, You know what, it's probably going to be nighttime by the time we go there, and I really want to see everything happen. So I'm just going to keep burning until that indicated, I don't know what that's called, that line, that indicated line shows that we are going to go near the desert. So I'm going to cut off the engine right about now, and then I'm going to separate that service module. So say bye-bye to that. That's no longer operable to you. You're not going to use it for anything else. And you notice how we had a lot of liquid fuel left. Rendezvousing, if you do it, if done properly, should not require a lot of fuel at all, really. I mean, the Soyuz, that, you know, you see how big, or the space shuttle, you see how big that is. You're like, oh wow, it must take a lot of force, like almost the same force to get to the moon. Not at all in Kerbal Space Program, because everything's to the 10th of a scale, and honestly, the Soyuz overdoes it. Because I think they have fuel left over. But now we're coming in for a perfect, beautiful descent into the atmosphere. Right now it's lagging for me, but I'm not quite sure if that's frame rate or anything. But everything should be smooth. You see that aviator, I don't know what that means, but I believe that is the left endurance in the heat shield. So if that aviator like goes super low, then I think that heat shield is basically useless and it's going to start burning up and overheating. But you'll see me eject or jettison my heat shield once those parachutes start expanding and deploy. That's just to get rid of some weight. But just remember when you get into an orbit, go into a slightly lower orbit than your targets. Once you've lined up to the closest approach, burn retrograde, because that's the difference between you and the target. You want to minimize that distance and then turn towards the target, because you're basically both at the same velocity, so you're not going anywhere. You don't really have too much difference. And there goes the parachute deploy. You don't have too much difference, and then just burn towards your target and dock. It's really quite simple, but generally is easy to do once you learn it. And remember, just go back to the video if you feel confused at all, and just remember, launch lower orbit slightly, burn retrograde, burn towards the target, line her up, and dock. It's pretty simple. I mean, good luck with yours.